The Canadian Tulip Festival is proud to present Dutch Folk Tales. Today's story, The Farm That Ran Away and Came Back. There was once a Dutchman named Ryer. Ryer had a sturdy wife, 4 children, 4 horses, 6 cows, 2 dogs, roosters, hens, a flock of geese, 24 ducks, and a hateful donkey named Strap. Although Ryer was quite rich, he was a greedy soul who always wanted more. He only fed his family bread and cheese, and he skimped on food for his animals. When he plowed, he drove close to the edge of the canals so that he could make use of every single inch of his land. Sometimes, bits of rich earth from his neighbors' farms would come loose and float out on the water. Well, whenever this happened, greedy Ryer would sneak out at night, grapple the watery bits of property, and fasten them to his farm. Well, after this had happened several times, Ryer had added a half acre to his holdings. By now, his greed had possessed him like a bad dream. He began to sneak out at night and steal land on the other side of the canals. He had become a land thief, and whenever he saw or heard of a nice bit of territory, he rowed his boat out into the darkness to claim it for his own. One year, the Netherlands were plagued by heavy rains that fell for many days until all the region was like a swamp, and the country seemed afloat. Ryer tried to force his horses to work despite the storm, but they would not budge. Even Strap would not leave his stall. At last, Ryer was forced to admit defeat, and he headed for home and a warm fire. But where was his glorious farm with the house and fields? Where were his wife and children? It had all simply vanished. Well, to Ryer, it looked as if a giant as big as the world itself had bitten out a piece of his land and swallowed it down. But what had actually happened is this. When the wind changed from south to west, Ryer's farm, which was made of many stolen bits of loose land, had broken free, and now it was adrift and moving due west towards North Holland. The younger children clapped their hands in glee, for they thought it was great fun to ferry across the big water at such a great speed. Oh, but Ryer's wife clung to the bedpost, afraid to move lest she be swept into the water. Occasionally, the farm passed by fishermen who wondered at such a curious sight. In some of the villages, the runaway farm became the subject of chat and gossip among the women as they milked the cows or knitted stockings. All this time, Ryer had pursued the farm on foot, running through bogs and fields and villages, desperate to keep his home in sight. Finally, after several days, he came close to the floating farm. He could see that his wife and children were wild with fear of starving. All the food for the cattle had been eaten up. The dog had no meat, the cat had no milk, Strap was braying loudly with hunger. But Ryer could not reach them. He could do nothing but watch as they drifted by. Then he sat on the riverbank and wept. Taking pity on poor Ryer, a whole convoy of boys, fishermen, and farmers gathered and offered to go out and tow the runaway farm to the village wharf. So they did just that, and before long, the farm was held fast to the shore by sturdy ropes. Ryder finally returned to his home, and the whole family rejoiced until at last they fell asleep by the fire. Now, just before midnight, the west wind rose mightily and blew to a terrific gale. In a moment, the tow line snapped and Ryder's poor farm left the wharf and was driven at a furious rate across the Zuider Zee. Then, quite suddenly, the farm, now an accomplished traveler, shot right back into its old place. The whole family woke to find themselves safe and sound and right back where they belonged. As you might guess, from that day forward, Ryder became an honest man. From time to time, he sawed off portions of his big farm and returned them to their owners. He lived long and happily on his little farm, which was all he really needed after all.